Welcome to the Belonging Place podcast. We're so happy to have you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would just love you to introduce yourself to us so we can get to know you a little bit. Well, the audience can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm Kristen. Do you want my full name?
Yeah.
I'm Kristen Lee Metzger. My initials are a Royal Dutch airline. That's
Okay.
a fun fact.
Okay.
And I am a foodie. And that, and maybe we'll get to this, but food is a way that I love to connect with culture, with humans. And I love the opportunity also to, just on that note, because I just love traveling because of the opportunity that brings. I love people and the nature that they embrace. So wherever that is in the world. So I think those are that's kind of the trifecta of my love languages,
People, travel, food.
people, nature,
Got
food.
it.
And the
Got it.
travel
Got it.
gives me the chance to see all of those things in such stark, different spaces.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the purposes of putting this podcast together was to bring some of my favorite people to the table to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is gathering, connection. I specifically call it belonging. There's lots of terms, right? One of the first questions I want to ask you is, there's been a lot of talk, and even the Surgeon General recently has come out and talked about and put some evidence-based stuff out about how much loneliness is sort of this insidious problem we have. I'm curious, Kristen, from your perspective and from your background, I just want your thoughts about that, first of all. Where you're seeing that, do you agree with that? What does that look like?
With the idea of loneliness. Yeah, we're just going right there.
We're going right there. Yeah.
No lead up. It was great. Good thing I love to be vulnerable. I really do. I do. I don't want to joke about that. I think that when we're open, that is a way to actually not feel lonely.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more open I've been about my stories, about my pain points, about my wins, all of it, I feel like that has helped that connection and to mitigate that loneliness. And when I think about the time when I maybe felt the loneliest and maybe I associate the loneliness with my greatest heartbreak or heartache, when I felt such a strong connection and then felt the grief of losing that connection. I feel like that is a very lonely place, because if you're used to being you and only you, then you can find a rhythm, right? And I feel like I found that in general from so many years of being single. And but in this chapter, when I felt this break and the grief that took over, I think I felt a loneliness that I didn't know I was capable of feeling, because I had never felt love and connection so deeply before.
So it was the loss of having something that you hadn't had.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it had changed me, that love and that connection that I didn't know was possible. I thought that was my ultimate connection. Other than my connection with heaven, I feel like that was my ultimate earthly connection. Whoa, this is what that feels like. Wait, that's not for me anymore. And it wasn't my choice. And so I remember feeling that almost like time stopped, and I felt like I had a decision to make in that moment of which direction I was going to let the grief, the anger, the loneliness take me, which was harden. And I think that's a temptation with loneliness, is our heart wants to just protect and defend and hold you. Or can I keep my heart open? And how do I do that when I'm feeling so much alone? And it was interesting because that time I was in a situation, I was in a role that summer where I was needed to teach and to lift. Like I was in a leadership role that summer, and I knew how important that was to all these like 100 people at a time with rotating groups of people. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot lift if I shut down and just sit in this lonely.
Is this that in Nauvoo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember literally falling on my knees outside in the gravel, like outside the rehearsal space. I had to leave the rehearsal. I was so emotional because I just found out a lot of things about the finality of that break. And I just prayed, and I was like, I'm going to need your help. And I need you to help me like hold my heart. I'm a very visual person. So I just asked God to hold my heart until it felt strong enough to like beat on its own again. But it felt very fragile. And I felt that all summer. It was so cool because I felt a capacity to connect that I hadn't felt before, because I knew my heart needed to stay open, and to keep a heart like pumping, it has to do what it's supposed to do, which is physically, yes, pump blood, but a heart is built to love and connect. And when you're lonely, or if you allow the loneliness to take over, your heart is not doing what it's meant to do. And so the way I got through that summer and started healing after that was because my heart was actively doing what it was supposed to do. It was connecting. And I found so many people that summer that were going through similar things, like their heart felt broken. And I would never have been able to say, hey, I'm with you. And then I didn't feel lonely, and neither did they. And it was so beautiful. And so my understanding of loneliness is it's a choice. And I say that gently.
Right.
Because I'm not belittling or taking away the weight of what that feels like. I know what that feels like. And I have cried many nights, and I understand that feeling, but I also know what it feels like even in that space to choose to say, I need help, but also let me help so that my heart doesn't sit alone.
I love that. And part of that, there's a book that I know that you know that I love called Making Loss Matter. It's about a rabbi. He talks about these two neighbors that are talking to each other, and one says, "Do you love me, neighbor?" And the neighbor says, "Of course I love you." And the other neighbor says, "Do you know my pain?" And the other neighbor says, "I don't know your pain." And the neighbor says, "Well, how can you love me if you don't know my pain?" Which has been such a part of my story and my journey. And I wonder, I'm looking back, I'm seeing you at Nauvoo, I'm seeing you giving. It sounds like being in a painful spot, it's almost like a clarion call to other people who are feeling pain. It's like pain, or light attracts light, pain attracts pain, right?
Yeah.
And being able to sit in that. I see you as somebody who's very strong and a leader, even when you're having the hardest times. But talk to me a little bit about what you got back from being vulnerable and maybe sharing with other people. Did you get back from that community as much or more than you were putting into it? And what did that look like or feel like?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, even from the moment of like, this person was connected to Nauvoo.
Okay.
That I had felt like was my partner. Yeah. And so during that summer, I had kind of thought maybe we would get back together at some point, but it was during Nauvoo, right before the falling on the gravel, that a 16-year-old girl had seen something on Instagram, because she followed him as well. She was invested in our story. And so she's the one that came and found me and told me that he was getting married. And she, like, tiny little girl, tiny 16-year-old, and I'm in my pioneer dress, and she tells me, she's like, I don't want you. She was so awkward too. It was so cute. And she's like, I love you, and I should probably tell you, I don't know. And she tried like 5 times, and then she told me, and I just like fell into her arms. And she can't hold me up, but she tried, and it was so sweet. And I felt like instantly, I literally felt held. And then even when I had to leave the rehearsal, like very instantly, like people could tell something had changed. And they just like wrapped their arms around me, like literally and physically wrapped their arms around me. And then of course that's what brings out the emotion very quickly is feeling that love. And so
That love comes out of your face.
oh
your
yeah,
eyes.
it just pours out so much love. And all summer, I remember every single time I sat next to somebody in the audience and they started sharing with me. And I felt like I couldn't keep anything surface either because A, I can't hide anything. And B,
No.
I felt like I was craving that connection too. And I think when you crave connection and love, it is attraction. If you are offering that love out and saying, hey, how are you? Like, how's your heart? And when someone shares with you, you're able to go, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
And when you feel needed, but also then seen in reverse, when both people are feeling seen, I felt so like by the end of that was a hard summer. I'm not saying, oh, once I decided to open my heart, it was easy. No.
Right.
And it was beautiful because of how hard that was, because I felt so much love. And I felt a lot of love from God too, because I felt like he was like, okay, I know this is hard, but I needed you to be in this space to touch and love a lot of my children this summer. And so thanks for doing that, hun. And so I felt a lot of love this way.
I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah.
If you can take care
Yep.
of this situation. It's so interesting. I haven't told this story very often, but it reminds me. So when I was doing EFY as a field coordinator, one of the building coordinators, BCs, had their brother was killed in a motorcycle accident while they were out there. And it was really just such a gift, I feel like, not that his brother died, but that I had my brother had died, and that I had this very specific shared, different experiences, different
Right.
lives, but shared, I don't know, opportunity. That sounds weird to say, but
Yeah.
I remember one time he was sitting and he was playing the guitar and we were sitting and I opened up to him and I told him the story and he says, and I feel like both of our lives changed that day. It was the first person that he talked to since it was really new, right? That could like relate on some level. And it was the first time that this was years after my brother's death, but it was the first time I really felt like my brother's death gave me purpose and connection for somebody else, right? Like my experience that I had, the grief that I had. I remember sitting there and we were talking, we were crying, but we were also laughing. And he said, that was the first time it gave me permission to be happy in the middle of the most profound grief that I've ever had, because I could sit with you in it and I could be real and I could laugh, but I could also cry and I could be messy and I could also pull myself together to do the next thing we had to do at EFY. But something about like grief and pain being the antidote to that loneliness, right? It calls, our hearts call for willing to other people. And then that locks our souls almost, right?
Yeah.
Like our stories get to live on inside of other people. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. On that level of like being an anecdote, I truly passionately believe that the antidote to loneliness is connection and belonging. I also think it's the antidote to addiction and lots of mental health. I'm curious, just when we talk about belonging or this idea of connection, like what are your thoughts about that? What does that mean to you? That's a really big, maybe diverse word. I'm curious, Kristen Metzger, what do you think about that?
I'm visual again.
Yeah.
So when I picture connection, I picture Hygge.
Okay.
Do you know this term?
Hygge.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
I also visually have to spell it. Hygge.
Yes. It's a Danish concept, and it has become a really beautiful visual for me because Hygge is like you picture a snowy day in the mountains. It's very lonely outside. It's dark. It's cold, but inside it's warm. There's a fire burning. There's a lot of friends gathered around the fire. They're cozy in blankets. There's like fresh baked bread and soup to dip it in. Like it just feels very
Focaccia,
cozy.
right?
Yeah, focaccia, sourdough. Artisan, whatever. And it just feels like cozy in every way and love and like it doesn't matter that it's dark outside, we're together and we're warm because we're together, and there's laughter and tears, like all of it. And so to me, that's connection, that's belonging, is having a space, creating that space where either you bring people to that place or you can just create that in a one-on-one where you're saying, I see you and I feel seen. And sometimes that's tears and sometimes it's laughter and you're understanding my jokes and you're like, we're in the same place. And also, to me, connection is also sharing an experience. So whether that is food, I mean, I think our charcuterie board is like the best example because everybody's just like, they bring their own ingredients and then they're sharing and creating and putting different bites together. And but the people that I feel most connected to, I have had some kind of experience with them, a growth experience, an adventure, a healing, a magical food experience, any of that, a spontaneous, a dance, a connection on the dance floor, like anything where I feel like your emotions or your minds or hearts are able to go, okay, I see that and I have something to share or add. And it's like little flashlights meeting. I don't know. I've never said that before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you are seen,
Yeah.
where you matter, and where people understand you. Maybe those are my terms. Those are not your terms.
Yes.
But to be seen, to be heard, to have a seat at the table,
and in reverse, like that you are doing that with someone else, and also that there's purpose there. I feel like that's a huge reason for belonging.
Tell me more about that.
If I feel like, for example, what I shared, I felt like I had purpose that summer to use my pain. I remember feeling I did not want my pain to be in vain. I remember that strongly. I did not want it to be wasted. I'm like, okay, if I have to feel this, I'm going to use it and I'm going to use it for good. So please guide me. And I felt that so many times. So I think that belonging, like whether it's a religious connection or a spiritual group that you're part of, which is definitely a place where I feel beautiful belonging, sharing beliefs and sharing or feeling a sense of belonging, like especially when I've had an opportunity in various settings to be a teacher of gospel doctrine or of missionaries or in the Nauvoo pageants. Like I feel so much belonging when I feel like I have something to contribute. I can be an instrument for other people to have a beautiful experience. And I mean, there's a Scottish proverb that I just love so much, and it's, "Thee lift me, and I'll lift thee, and we'll ascend together."
I love that.
That is connection and belonging.
Yeah.
To me.
And I think one of the things that attracted me so whole heart, mind to you as a person is that you exude this. You also exude my favorite Japanese word. If anybody's ever listened to me talk or read my book or anything, I talk about the word kigatsuku, which is the Japanese word for, the kanjis mean to ignite my spirit to awareness. The closest word we have in English is like to take initiative. It doesn't even come close, but it's this idea that I enter the room and I observe and I'm aware. And if a thing needs to be done or a heart needs to be held or a conversation needs to be had, or I need to sit and insert myself physically into that, two people sitting on the couch, or I need to bring the food. I think you exude belonging, but also that kigatsuku spirit about you. It's one of the things I love about you. I'm going to say, okay, I love that about you and I see that about you. And one thing that we share a lot in common, and I wanted to get to in this podcast, is this other side. I don't know, it's maybe the opposite of what I would call like a silver lining. It's almost like this insidious negativity, whatever. There's this thread that happens for a lot of people. I know you and me have talked about this through the years, that comes in with what I call ambiguous loss. The loss of something you don't have. So not having a partner, or not having a child, or not having whatever, but those are the two specific ones we share in common. That for a lot of people, that thread seems to almost take over or tank their ability to see good or love. They feel othered, maybe that God didn't see them or choose them, or other people get to be married and divorced and married again before you've had your last date. Or before, maybe this is me. I'm just saying.
Feels very specific.
Maybe you can relate. And that there is an opportunity in our lives as people who are single to be caught up in that and to get stuck in that. And there's also this push-pull where then, well, I don't want to see that or do that, so I'll just go build and grow and gather, and maybe try to ignore this piece, but it doesn't go anywhere. Like anything that you push down pain. I'm curious at a very micro level, because you're good at this, and a lot of people that are listening to us are not good at this. How you manage that? I don't know if I described that very well. Do you understand what I'm saying, though? That thing that's always sort of around. And you said that one of your belonging places is maybe your religious space. And there would be a lot of people that would say in that religious space, there's a lot of accidental or on purpose othering. That's what I'm calling it. Where like you don't have a family. You know, there's not really like a system. In the system, you got off the track somewhere because you went to school, and then you went on a mission, and then you didn't do the next steps that are like
and still
integral in there. And some people, that path leads them to be like, well, then I can't be a part of that team or group.
Yeah.
And yet you have said, no, I will somehow between the two of those find joy. I'm curious what gave you permission, what allowed you to hold both places. What do you do when one overwhelms the other? Like, yeah.
Yeah. That's the journey that I've been navigating for a long time. And I remember, so when I had a chapter where when hashtags, I feel like, first came out, one of my hashtags, especially because the experience I was sharing earlier with this man, we had a long distance experience for a long time. And I remember my hashtag at the time was love the waiting. And that, I mean, I put that on everything. I was just like, love the waiting. Love it. And even when I didn't feel like it. And I felt it. Like, I felt like, what is this? What do I get to experience in this time? And I think I also had another hashtag at the time, because then I had just moved to LA. I was pursuing acting. And my other hashtag was called to serve in film.
Yeah.
Or called to serve in Los Angeles. And I think that when you have something so potent that you not only desire, but feel like it's something you're supposed to do.
Called to
do. Like that. I feel like, I mean, I'm religiously, my heart, my body, like all of those things tell me I should have a partner that I should make babies with and progress with that human forever. And that's a good thing. So why can't I have it? And you have that. But if you feel something even bigger, for example, if my bigger purpose in this life is to become like God, to become like my Savior, to bring light to people around me, to lift people around me, and make it home to heaven, a better human, more like heaven, etc. Like, if that's my purpose on a very large scale, and marriage and children is part of that, I can still work on this bigger one, even amidst this not happening yet. Hopefully this is a mile marker along the route, but it doesn't mean I'm stunted in this bigger purpose. And because what if I didn't get this in this life? Would I get to the end and be like, well, I missed the whole mark?
Or what if you got it, because many people do,
And then lost it.
and lost it, or got it and it really wasn't all
Yeah.
that.
Because how many friends have been like, okay, sometimes I wish I were single, you know? Like,
Or people are in a marriage that they're not happy.
right.
They're not building the kingdom. Those are my words.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they're using their gifts, right?
Yeah. And so I feel like if you have purpose and you are like, you also have an open, I don't know, mindset, vision to like what is available to you in gratitude and curiosity. Okay, so maybe, thanks for letting me talk out my thoughts. I think gratitude and curiosity and purpose. Those are the three things that I believe have helped me to live a very full, rich life, still
Amen.
desiring those things because I'm grateful for the experiences I'm having that maybe I wouldn't have had in the same way had I been married already. I'm curious about what is possible, what adventure, what other thing can I jump into and give my whole heart to because I don't have someone that needs my attention right now in that way. What else is possible? How else can I fulfill and use my talents? And so that's what I would say. Those three things are the main three.
I love what you said, specifically purpose, gratitude, remind me, curiosity. These seem to be the things that have helped you navigate that, what I don't have and what I do have, I guess, as simply as I put it. Okay, so with that in mind, part of what brought me to the Belonging Place podcast is this idea that for years, people that were either younger or the same age as me, there was this like need for the church, an organization, something to build the thing that would whatever, make me happy, bring belonging, have the activity. It didn't really matter. My friends that weren't even Christians or weren't even in the church, a same way. They're sort of like, who's going to establish the thing that's going to bring people together? Or, and it was really always interesting to me. It's like, I never understood why people felt like somebody else had to do that. Like, I always was a little bit self-driven. Like, if you want something to be done, you do it, right? And it was really interesting to me that finding that space between people that are like, well, sometimes we define them by producers and consumers, right? Mm-hmm. Consumers that are just like, I'm happy to be in the place and participate in the place, but I don't necessarily want to build the train. Building the train is really hard. Once the train is built, I'll jump on the train and have a good ride, right? And then there's people who are producers and they tend to really enjoy building the train, sometimes while it's on the track. The entrepreneur spirit, the desire to make something better, to, I said a little bit earlier, to like build the kingdom in their corner of the world. I see you as a producer. Like I see you also as a consumer, like you're happy to go and be in other belonging places. But if ever there was a person who was just like building trains left and right, I would say choo-choo to you. I think that's true about you. And so with that, do you agree? Do you see yourself as a producer?
I do. I see myself more that way than I used to. I definitely see you that way. 1,000%.
Yeah. I'm attracted to people who are also producers because it makes me feel safe and free to not have to feel that. Mm-hmm. I have a hard time. I think I've been working for years with this. I'm enough if I don't produce. I'm just enough, period. Because I don't know that I put my value always in production, but I've always felt this call to like produce, to do the thing, to gather the place, to hear the story. I think for the good mostly, right? But there's always a little bit of this like maybe to get away from other feelings that are uncomfortable. But I'm curious for you, in your life when you look back, are there any pivotal moments, this can be positive or negative, that where belonging or not belonging really impacted your life? This can be a mentor. This can be, really anything. When you look back where you're like, oh man, this is someplace where I felt known or seen, or this was someplace that as a result of not feeling like I belonged or whatever really pushed me on a different path. I'm just curious when you look over your life.
I think it's an interesting juxtaposition, the experience that is coming to mind, because I felt really strongly that I needed to move to Hawaii. I felt called to move to Hawaii. And
But not just Hawaii. Tell us
yeah.
where Hawaii.
So I felt a calling to move to Kalapapa, which is where the leprosy colony is in Hawaii, and to be with those people that had been afflicted with leprosy their whole lives. And I remember feeling like such a beautiful connection, like with the divine, feeling like I remember even standing like on a rock overlooking the ocean and feeling so strongly that this is exactly where I needed to be. And I don't often feel that like that strongly. And that not only was I supposed to be there, because I thought it was only a 3-month gig, I felt you need to stay here longer. And that is not my norm. My norm is have an experience, beautiful, give my whole heart, and then move on and have another experience, because I just want them all. I like collect experiences like Pokemon. Like I just want all of them, right? And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, but this is like a 7-mile radius place with 50 people, maybe 70 on a busy week. And you want me to stay longer? And so I felt this like need to belong and to connect, because I was supposed to be there.
Because you had to stay.
Yeah. And the challenge that I had never experienced before was that not everyone, I love Hawaiians and I love their culture. I love the spirit of aloha. But sometimes it's hard for some people in Hawaii to let you in to their community. They've had a lot of haole is the term for an outsider. They've had a lot of haoles come in. And I mean, even just the way we took over their state or made it part of our country. And so I think I didn't expect, especially coming with such good intention. I'm here to help the people that need help and like put me to work. And I didn't expect to feel so much the outsider. And to feel like because of where I came from, I wasn't accepted by everyone. There were some people that just wrapped me right up, of course. Full spirit of aloha. Like, we love you. Thank you for being here. But there were people that it took a very long time. And I felt very isolated in a place where I was there to build connection.
Yeah.
And to try to build bridges. And it's hard when you feel like your heart, your love, what you're offering is not being seen or accepted. And that you're just like, you feel like you're failing. And I mean, that is rejection at its greatest. Because I just felt like I was throwing my heart out there and it was not wanted. And yet I felt like I couldn't give up. I mean, I literally couldn't go anywhere because then also the pandemic started.
I was going to say.
And then the whole world went into isolation. Give us some perspective
on how long you stayed here because of your circumstances.
Yeah, I ended up staying 2 years instead of 3 months. And so.
Not just a short little time.
Everyone in my family's like, wow, she's still there. On that little rock.
And your friends.
And my friends.
They're like, are
what?
you ever coming back to us?
I'm like, I don't know. And I mean, that was a time when I felt more isolated possibly than any other time.
Not that I'm using Brene Brown's word, we don't have to silver lining everything, right?
Yeah.
But as someone who loved you through that experience and has known some of that, would you say that what happened on the opposite side of that such disconnect, and that's from the people and the places that you usually receive energy from? What happened? Was there good things that happened as a result of you not having all your regular places to go?
Oh my gosh. I felt, I mean, the beginning was very difficult. And like that feeling of, oh, I have to like find a way in. Like I have to, like you're almost trying to like force your way in. And then realizing like relaxing into, which is a little bit easier to do in the islands, right? Like
I'm a visitor here.
the air,
right?
you know, everything in the air and the space in the ocean. Like I felt like I learned to relax and like offer. Because I remember many years ago, actually, that prepared me for this. I had a very wise friend say to me, it was in a performance space. I was up on stage and she said, you can't, and it was in a religious performance in Nauvoo. She said, you can't demand that people receive what you're giving. You just give. And if they want it and if they have space for it, they'll receive it. And if not, you know that you gave. And that's how I ended up.
You show up, you do the work.
I'm not going to not love, and I'm not going to stop sharing and doing what I feel like I'm here to do. And if you don't have space for that, that's okay. I will still be here and reach out and being okay with that and grieving a little bit some losses of some relationships that could have been, and realizing I can't choose that. I only get to choose how I show up and what I offer. And I know what I have to share and what I have to give and what my heart is capable of. And there were some people that eventually did open up and receive that connection, and some never did. But I walked away from that place, I mean, feeling such a beautiful connection to the place, to the people, to the to the ocean, to everything. And I felt, I mean, I left with very dear, dear friends. And I mean, a big part of my heart is still in Hawaii. And so I think changing from fighting to just offering was a big lesson for me in isolation and also connection.
Love that. Okay, I love all that. I love hearing the different sides of that. One of the things from on the outside of kind of watching your journey happen and very much missing you and all of that, it seemed to me, and I'd like you to tell me a little bit more about this, that there was growth, so much growth in the part that you were invited to be still and be away from all of the people that are usually connected to you, and be away from all of maybe the I want to go do this and I want to go do this and I want to try on this, and like I'm actually I don't know if stuck is the right word, but I'm actually here for who knows how long, and so what can I learn from my experience? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about that.
Yeah. For those that don't know, I am an extreme extrovert. And so me being in a space like that, 7 miles around, 40 to 50 people most of the time, that was isolating, and feeling this like, oh no, there's not enough connection. And most evenings, and I had really lovely friends down there that are family now to me, but most evenings I would walk outside my little house, go sit on the sand and watch the sunset over the ocean, which was magical. It was solitary. It was still. And most of the time I wasn't doing a darn thing. I was just sitting there observing the sunset. And I miss those moments. I have to really make an effort to be still now that I'm back on the mainland in that kind of hubbub of life as a creator and a businesswoman and a friend and a family member. And there it was, if you don't have a human to connect with all the time, where do you find connection? With nature. It kind of goes back to what I said at the very beginning. I felt part of something. I felt part of something this way, feeling, I mean, when I was in the ocean, learning how to spearfish, which is its own adventure. Awesome. I felt like I was immersed in this world that was letting me be part of it. I felt like I had a belonging to like Mother Earth.
Yeah, I love that.
And some people, myself included, I think that Mother Earth is an extension of our divine mother, or maybe that is exactly where she spends her time. And I I grew so much in that stillness, and I feel like I became a more whole human. And because I was so extroverted, and then now it was like, hey, who are you in the stillness? And what does that look like to just connect to the earth and the sand and the water, and to watch and observe and to see? And whether you feel like nature sees you in return, I would, I mean, I think some of the moments when I have felt most seen is in the stillness.
I love
When
that.
you can feel like a download, or feel a whisper.
Grounding.
Yeah, in the wind, which sounds like so hippie, but I feel that. Like, I have felt closest to God in a lot of ways in that stillness space when I'm not distracted with other beautiful connections.
Yeah.
And also when a sea turtle just stares at you.
Yeah.
You know, I just, so I think sometimes connection is very quiet.
I love that. And if we could quote that, sometimes connection is very quiet. I think so many people get hung up on connection being activities and being groups of people. And so people who are a little more introverted, which I actually am, which is always surprising to people, that does not fill up my battery. Like being in groups of people drains my battery. If you think of it as like the green bars, right? It's like, duh-duh-duh-duh-duh-duh. But if I sit with one person or a small group of people and we have a good conversation and we're vulnerable, it just fills my battery so quickly, right? I find connection often in smaller, quieter, more vulnerable, meaningful moments than I ever do in big groups of gathering or things like that. I think that's something to really help people distinguish that connection or belonging, or even like finding belonging places doesn't mean we have to be like dancing at the country dancing. Although you can find connection there, that doesn't mean you have to go to these places, right? You don't have to have parties. You don't necessarily have to. Those are great. And I think having a little bit of all different kinds of ways to gather and connect people so that you can be seen in different ways is important. But I love the emphasis that you just shared about like, there's a lot of different ways to find connection than even just people, right? And sometimes there's this distraction. I'll never forget, I spent 6 weeks in Ghana years ago. And when I was first there, I mean, everything was just so slow. And we were just so used to multitasking as Americans. And even the part of me that was just like pretty happy to just enjoy all the culture and the food and the people, it was still so slow. And I remember one day we were having market day, and I'm putting my fingers up in quotes because I learned that that's all we're doing that day. We're going to go to the market. On the way, we're going to talk to people. We're going to then enjoy the market. And then on the way back, we're going to talk to people. And that is the whole day activity. Juxtaposed to like, I'm going to go to the store, and then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to go to work. Like all the things that the store was just like one of the checklists of things that you were doing. And after being there long enough in Ghana, I found myself, rather than being annoyed at this was our all day activity, that I was like, this is our all day activity. The one thing we're going to put all our energy into the people that we see, the clothing that people were making, just I think because I love it, the creativity that was everywhere, food, clothes, culture, language. And we're going to really consume the moment and be present and do it. And then I wasn't splitting my attention, 8 different ways and trying to be present, but I was just right where my feet were. I cried buckets of tears when I came back to America, and I realized like that loss of being so present, that one task is enough to fill a whole day, that we don't have to be moving, that there is this connection in the, I guess, simple things, and how powerful it, like its own lesson is coming in and out of that experience to be like, you know what, I don't have to be busy. I don't have to be producing all the time to feel connected or to feel loved. Sometimes I need to slow down. Sometimes I need to do less, put less on my plate, and be more present. Yeah.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Because something that's clicking for me too is the simplicity, yes. And also, especially from my scenario, but it sounds a little bit like yours too. Sometimes connection to me has felt like the stars in the sky, constellations. Like, how many constellations can I connect? How many stars can I connect to and draw lines between? I want to connect to everyone and everything.
I want to hear all your stories.
Yeah. And I love that. And I get so much energy that way. But if you look at a star, and some of these stars that we see in the night sky are actually galaxies. Like, instead of trying to connect to every single dot in the sky, like, what if I just focused on one and just saw how far it went, like how deep that one connection can go? And I experienced that in Hawaii. I didn't have a million people to connect with. I didn't have a million activities. It was the same thing every day, most of the time. Like, I got in the ocean every day, the same spot in the ocean most of the time. I climbed the same hike because I had one main hike that I was accessible to. Like, how deep can you go with a connection instead of always?
Yeah. I also felt like, as an observer watching you, it seemed like, and I would love your thoughts about this, that there was this different kind of joy and belonging on the other side. So you weren't able to really go to your church gathering very often. It seemed like it was like manna to the soul, almost. Like, when I do get to go to that, or when I did get to come and see my friends, or you had people visit you, or you had packages that were delivered to you, or things, they seemed to matter more, or you seem to be more grateful about that. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
How did that feel?
Oh, I mean, if I wanted to go to church, it was also the pandemic, but when the pandemic kind of was over and I was still living there, I mean, if I wanted to go to church, it was climb the 26 switchback hike up the cliff, bring a change of clothes, bring some wipes because I'm going to be sweaty, and someone picks me up at the top of the cliff and drives me to church. And I mean, I felt like a pioneer, a pilgrim, like, I will make it to the church. And I mean, I would walk into the church like, what do I have no idea what it look like? But I was so, like, I was just like all smiles. I'm like, I just climbed a cliff, a mountain, to be at church, literally. And it was beautiful. And the people that were there to welcome me, and like, so grateful that I made the journey. Or even when I would just get a Marco Polo from a friend and, found Wi-Fi, because I didn't even have, not great service anywhere down there. And it really was these little gifts and certain relationships. It's interesting when it's not easy or convenient to connect. Not only do you appreciate it more, but sometimes, yes, it will weed out. I shouldn't say weed out. Some people will fade out if it's not convenient and if it's not easy and you can't be like with someone in person. But some relationships in my life, this is one, like, some of them thrived. And actually, I mourned a little bit when I came back to the mainland and didn't have this like consistent Marco Polo with certain friends, because now we were available to each other in person, but that didn't mean I saw them as frequently as I could have Marco Polo'd them. And so that was an interesting lesson to me too, like that technology and that scarcity made some people work harder to connect with me. And it strengthened certain relationships in a way that they might not have strengthened to that depth had I still been with them in person.
It builds a resilience, right? Like, you're out of pocket. I love you. I'm going to do whatever it is that I have to do to stay connected to you because I value you wherever you are in my life. Builds a depth to that than when you're right in front of you. Couple more things I want to ask you before we end. Kind of going back to your values, I think you were talking about being curious, about being grateful. As a producer, break it down a little bit for us. Like, it seems easy for you to create the gathering places or to invite people in as an extrovert, maybe, and maybe just as a person who likes gathering, but help me understand a little bit, like, where does that come from? Were you inherently born to just be like, everybody come in? Did you learn that? Did you do that because you wished other people were and they weren't? I'm curious.
We'll discover as I talk out loud.
Okay.
The first thing that comes to mind is like when I was young, I'm the oldest in my family. I have 3 younger siblings, and I was always planning things for us to do.
Okay.
I was organizing classroom settings where I would be the teacher and we would do things. I was organizing skits. I was choreographing dances for my sister and myself to perform for our family. Like I was constantly doing and inviting my siblings or my friends to be part of something, and I wanted to be the one in the lead.
Got it.
And my dad said the same thing. Like even when I was littler, like you can't remember, he's like, oh yeah, you'd be like on the porch and all the little neighborhood kids would come up and you'd like guide them through something. And I was just organizing, and I just wanted to, be in the lead and just make sure we were doing things that were fun. Like I just didn't want to sit around.
Got it.
So I think that's probably what it was. Like I wasn't going to wait. And I think that's like carried into my adult life, like love the waiting. I'm not just going to sit here, even though there's something I really want that I feel like I can't quite control the timing of. Well, I can't. And I'm not going to wait. So I feel a need. I mean, we're all creators.
Yeah.
That is the most divine thing about all of us, is that we have the ability to create, and some maybe feel like it's more natural to them. And I do believe it comes more naturally to me.
Let me stop on that for just a second. There's this quote that I love that I share with a lot of people about this idea. It comes from Sterling Sill's books. He has a set of books called Leadership that are really great. There was a phrase in there that like really struck me, and it says, most ideas die en route. So when you say, I also believe that the majority of us are creators, but what I find is that some people just go ahead and make it happen and build it and draw it and sing it and dance it and act it. And some people dream it and think about it, but they can't do the next thing. And maybe they're waiting for someone else to do it, but they want to write the book, but they want to start the club, but they want to do the thing. What do you think about you, or what would you share about connecting? What helps you to just like bake the bread and bring the people?
Because baking bread is fun. And not that I've never felt that. Like I have things right now that are still ideas and dreams, right? Like I also think that's universal.
Yeah.
We all have to get to a point where we believe in ourselves, where we feel something strongly enough that we're willing to do it and put ourselves out there.
Something has to happen on the other side of that you want to do it again. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. What happens when you create the gathering that you're like, I'm doing that again?
Because selfishly, it fills me.
Okay.
When I gather people, you build a charcuterie board and you gather all your friends and you tell them all to bring something, and it's like magic. Everybody like has something to offer, and we're gathered around the table, and it just feels like I feel so much love. That's it. The love, when you gather and you feel love, light, laughter, I mean, those things are contagious. They're drugs. And you want more of it.
Good drugs.
Yeah.
Natural highs.
Yeah. They are beautiful. And every single time I have done anything to gather, to have an experience with people, to, or to be still, or to like, I feel such, love, whether it's this way, light, laughter, tears. I mean, I just feel so much that you want to feel that again.
Yeah.
And
I call it generative. Like
yeah.
You're generating and they're generating.
Yeah.
My best friend and I call it spin. It's when you get in a room with people that are spinning at the same, right? Like we're all contributing. Because everybody doesn't know what these, I call them wells, these gathering places in the scripture. They used to be, the place where everyone would fall in love and where people would drink the water and where people, the pioneers would circle the wagons and they would play the music. What kinds of wells do you create? What kinds of things do you put out there? I know because I'm a part of them, but share with us a little bit, for example, recently in the last few months, what are some gatherings that you've put out there?
Well, for my birthday, I have played with 2 things the last couple years. both involving charcuterie, which I've brought up.
Always.
The people are going to be like, stop talking about the charcuterie board. But it's just such a beautiful example.
Oh, gathering.
And I am all 3 times. It was 2 book club nights where everybody was invited. Hey, bring your favorite thing that you want to put on the charcuterie board, whether it's sweet, savory, anything. And that's the fun thing about charcuterie. It's like literally almost anything goes.
Right.
And then whatever people bring, that's what you get to create from. Oh, now we have artichoke pesto spread, but we also have blue lavender goat cheese,
which was so good,
which was amazing, that I found in Denmark. And like, what do we do with all these things? It's just like a co-creative space. Those are my favorite kinds of gatherings. And everybody was also invited to bring a book that had impacted them that year, ideally. And that, I mean, I could have sat there for hours listening to people share about the things that had inspired them, the things they'd learned. And you bring this book and someone else walks away with that book and you get a book that has inspired someone else in this group. And it just I wish we had had a microphone on that night. Like the things that were shared and the way that people shared their hearts and what they had gained, it was magnetic. It was energizing. And then the other opportunity was a vision board night where we put 1 million magazines, old school, on the floor.
Literally,
and you brought 10,000 stickers and glue sticks and all the paper, and people just dreamed together. And so for me, like a dream gathering is, yes, it generally involves good food. And like, I love introducing people to like a new favorite restaurant or whatever, or just cooking for them. And it involves like something where there's, energy can be exchanged, whether that's ideas, like prompts, or we're in nature and we're on a hike together. I love gatherings that we're going to go to this waterfall and we're going to bring some fun treats to enjoy. Like I usually have a surprise treat or jar. Like I went on a hike the other day and invited a friend. And when we got to the waterfall, I just had this large mason jar of guava limeade from Rodizio Grill. And I just like shook it up so it was like nice and foamy and chilled. And we just like cheered it. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, and like, I think travel too, like if we can go on a trip together, and experience something together and do hard things. That's the other beautiful way to connect. Like we've talked about with pain, let's cold plunge together or get in the sauna after and back and forth. And my friend did that for his birthday. And I thought that was such a beautiful gathering because we're doing something hard together and feeling this like literal energy and also this like confidence that's like growing for all of us at the same time because we're doing something hard together.
Yeah.
I think doing hard things together is like also beautiful and one of my favorite ways to connect with people.
I love that. It seems like to you a really important piece of gathering and belonging is shared experiences, right? Like you want to do the thing, but it's almost double enjoyable to watch the people you love also do the thing. It's kind of like going to Disneyland's fun, but watching the niece and nephew or the kid experience it is almost better than experiencing it, right? The reason why I wanted you to kind of end and share with us some of those things is I also think that people often think that it's going to take a lot of money or it's going to take a lot of time or it's going to take a lot of, and that is a barrier for them to create belonging places of whatever they love. You love food, you love books, right? Maybe you ask people to go karaoke or go skating or, whatever it is that you do. I think one of the barriers that people have to building connection is that it takes that much energy. You have to call people or have to spend money. And for the most part, like the things that you shared, it was a group contribution, right? Yeah. Everyone's going to come together and everyone leaves better than they arrived, right? And everyone feels, I think, in the end, feels seen. Again, it comes back to that. Feels seen, feels heard, feels loved. They leave less lonely than they walked in, right? And then they want to do it again. Like you said, it's kind of addictive, right? And the great thing about that generative energy is that we then give and take from that group of people, right? It's one of the reasons why I really feel like connection and people finding belonging places. If you can find a belonging place, you can fail, but you can also fail forward. You can succeed. You can be safe enough that you can try something new, right? Because you can come back to this place where people love you just for who you are, not for what you do or for what you give them, but just for how you show up, right? And you're such a great example of that.
Thank you. I think too, if people are worried about that, or if that is something that gives them anxiety or that has prevented them from gathering, like even if you just start really small and there's something you want to do, like I've even done this in dating, which is a gathering place. Like two people come together to share an experience and to see connection, right? Even like you're having a conversation with someone new or with a dear friend, and a book comes up that you want to read. Like you just did this, like you've created like a small book club around one book that you want to read. That's an experience that you want to share with some friends. And I love that. So if there's something you want to do or that comes up in a conversation and you just say, be willing to take the initiative and just say, we should do that. And then just make sure it happens.
Follow up.
So it's actually, it's not about money. It's not about like having a big group. It's just, are you willing to follow up when there is something that you want to do or someone that you want to connect with? So if it's about the person, anything that comes up that you have in common or that you're like, oh my gosh, I have heard about that new restaurant. Why don't we try it out? Like, let's go together. That's a great way to get a date too. And you're just like, when are we going?
Yeah.
You know, like if something comes up that you have in common or that you connect over. But I would say more than anything, it's just being willing to be the one that says, hey, remember when we talked about that? Let's actually do that.
Yeah.
Let's get it on the calendar.
I would say for somebody like me too, who has some pretty severe executive function problems, working memory problems, the gift that I've told my friends vocally that helps me is if they say, if we're going to do something, they say, let's do it on Tuesday or Thursday at this time or this time. And then I say, okay, let's do it here. And we get it on the calendar.
Yeah.
And it's there. Then I am like, that is sacred space. Nothing, very few things are going to bump that, right? But that ability to go from an idea again, right? And something that's shared and that we're excited about to an actual place on the calendar. As we end, let me ask you this. Is there anything that you feel called or that you feel like maybe we didn't get to when it comes to this idea of belonging places or connection? Any quotes or any books or anything that you're like, man, I just really want to say this last piece?
Okay, two thoughts. One thought is the 4 agreements. One of the 4 agreements that it's this book, a small book. So if you haven't read it, please read it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Anyone. It's so good and so simple. And one of the agreements that you should make as you live is to never make any assumptions. And I think so many people assume that they might be the only one that feels this way, or when we're alone or when we feel lonely or a lack of connection, it's easy to be in an assumptive space about the people around us and about who we are if we're
the
isolated.
Story we tell ourselves.
Yes. And so that would be my first invitation, is to work on the skill or the muscle of not making any assumptions. If you feel any pings, whatever you want to call them, like, if I'm feeling lonely, possibly someone else is. If I want to go to this restaurant or I want to watch this movie or I want to read this book, I should just see if there's someone else that wants to do that with me. And
judgment.
Not assuming anything. And then the other thing too is that, like, and this is going to sound so cheesy, but this is literally what just came to me, is when you're talking about belonging space or, ways of connecting. And this goes back to the beginning of what I shared, but we have, like, our heart is the ultimate gathering place and mode of connection. It's right here. Like it is part of you. It is with you 24/7. So if you are putting that intention out there, like you want to connect with people, you want to belong, you want to invite people to belong, genuinely, everything you need is right here. And if you are prone to a little bit of anxiety or you're an introvert or whatever, I would just invite people to, like, tangibly or like tactily, like, feel your heart and breathe and go, I am a source of belonging. and a source of connection. And I can provide that for someone else. And I can also just do it right here and right here, or right here with this fake fiddle fake. But I have the capacity to feel the things that I want to feel with belonging or connection. And it's right here.
Thank you for sharing that. I have just loved everything about this conversation. I hope that people that are listening can be inspired like I am, in the way that it's not so hard to just create, to not only create belonging for others, which we've talked a lot about, but also create belonging for yourself, right? I just love that I love that you're in my life, and I love that you were able to be a part of this, and I'm excited to see some of the places in your life that you're going to put some energy in, some generative stuff, and the growth, and follow her, because there's some exciting things down the line. Kristen Metzger.
Thank you so much. I am honored. And thank you for letting me learn as I share as well.
Okay.
Beautiful.